Mr. Thompson calls the waiter, orders steak and baked potato. He leaves the bone and gristle and he never eats the skin. The busboy comes and takes it, with a cough contaminates it. He puts it in a can with coffee grounds and sardine tins. And the truck comes by on Friday, carts it all away. 1,000 trucks just like it are converging on the bay. Oh, garbage, 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 garbage. We're filling up the seas with garbage, 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 garbage. What will we do when there's no place left to put all the garbage?
Hello, KSQD listeners. It's every other Sunday again. I'm Brooke Wright here in the studio with Ronnie Lipschutz, who does such an amazing job at picking those tunes for us. Thank you, Ronnie. That was fun. And you are listening to Sustainability Now, a bi-weekly K-Squid radio show focused on environment, sustainability, and social justice in the Monterey Bay region, California, and the world. Today, our guest is Tim Goncharoff, and our topic is Foodware Beware. We will be talking about a series of foodware ordinances, what problems they are trying to solve, and how foodware ties to new food waste laws. Tim Goncharoff is a well-known waste knowledgeable person about town and across the Monterey Bay region, and has had a long and distinguished career in community service, locally and statewide, most recently as a zero waste programs manager at the County of Santa Cruz. He is also well known as an environmental leader responsible for many environmental protection programs and policies in Santa Cruz County and beyond. He has helped bring to fruition ordinances on composting, on foodware, drugs and sharps, plastic bags, polystyrene foam, which is the technical name for what people call styrofoam, and e-waste. He also has served on the boards of directors of the California Resource Recovery Association and the National Stewardship Action Council, and as chair of the County Engineers Association of California's Resource Recovery Committee. He's probably done a lot more than that, but that's as much as we're going to mention today. Tim Goncharoff, welcome to Sustainability Now.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Great. Yeah, thank you for joining us. Where are you joining us from, Tim?
Well, some of your listeners might have heard that I have moved out of Santa Cruz County, and I'm now living on the outer reaches of San Francisco Bay near the marshes. It's quite exciting and beautiful up here.
Nice. Okay. Lovely. Well, I'm sure there's so many things, given your background, there's so many things we could talk to you about today, but we wanted to focus on these ordinances and some of the related things around it. So I'll start with the bigger picture, though. So over the past few years, thanks to media coverage of the China's plastic recycling policies and probably other things, there has been a lot of focus on reducing and recycling plastic, and especially the flood of supposedly recyclable plastics that end up in landfills and in the oceans. So just sort of a big picture question, but is plastic waste the important waste issue of our time?
You know, it's certainly one of them. I think plastic waste does deserve the attention it's getting. It's not our only waste problem, but it has so much in common with all of our most important problems. It's a product of the petrochemical industry, just like so many toxic chemicals and fossil fuels, which drive our climate crisis. You can think of plastic pollution as the tip of the spear. If we can fix that, there's a good chance we can fix the other problems too.
And as far as in our region, could you give us an overview of the plastic waste situation here?
Sure. Some of our plastic waste problems are unique to this area, and others are being felt everywhere. Of course, the additional waste generated by the pandemic is a huge problem, from masks to gowns to barriers and so many other products, as is the massive increase in online shopping and all the packaging waste that comes with it.
Right.
But we also have an enormous agricultural industry, which people don't always realize generates a great deal of plastic waste. We have a huge tourism industry in Santa Cruz County, which brings in lots of people who may have different attitudes about waste and who haven't had the benefit of our local education about waste and pollution and protecting the environment. Those are big challenges for a small county.
Right. And has that changed over time? It seems to me that driving through ag fields didn't used to seem like driving through plastic fields, but it does now.
Yeah, agriculture has been as subject to technological changes as any other industry. And they have found that covering the fields with plastic is a great way to keep weeds down, keep moisture in the soil, keep pesticides from spreading beyond the fields. So there are good reasons why they're using it. But recycling all of those acres and acres of ag plastic when they're done with it is a real challenge.
Right, right. And you mentioned how COVID has created various plastic burdens, and one of those seems to be food to go ware. Those people, did a lot more to go, and a lot of restaurants, I think even till now, aren't using reusable dishware that used to. So my understanding is there were ordinances banning plastic to go ware that were drafted and approved before COVID, and then sort of got put on hold. Can you speak to that and sort of in relationship to all the things you're talking about, where this to-go plasticware kind of fits in the, burden?
Obviously, COVID threw everybody for a loop, and County Board of Supervisors decided, understandably enough, that we didn't want to add to the burdens of local business.
Right.
So they didn't change the activation date of our local ordinances, but they just said, let's go easy on enforcement for now. Let's wait till things calm down. So at this point, some of the ordinances that have been on hold are anticipated to take more serious effect this summer. Of course, that depends on what happens with the next COVID variant and how that affects us all. But we're hoping to get back to some semblance of normal by summer.
Got it.
Tim, this is Ronnie. Hi, how are you doing?
Hey, Ronnie. I'm doing great. It's great to hear your voice.
Last summer, we had Jackie Nunez from the Last Plastic Straw on the show. And straws are pretty small contributors to the global waste problem, but they've become sort of an icon of the evils of single-use plastic, especially after that video of the sea turtle with a straw stuck in its nose.
Yep.
And so, because of the visibility, there were plastic straw bans before more general foodware ordinances were passed. Was it the turtle, so to speak? Or, if not, where did this momentum for plastic straw bans come from? And how important is that in the big picture?
I think the turtle was an important moment. It took what was kind of an abstract intellectual argument for many people and made it something real and visceral. Suddenly people could understand in the impact, in a way that felt important to them. And of course, there's an important lesson there for those of us in the movement. You have to reach people in ways that matter to them. By the way, I owe thanks to Jackie for bringing the straw issue to my attention. When she asked, isn't there something we can do to get rid of plastic straws? I thought about it and realized, well, heck yeah, there is. And that led to the world's first plastic straw ban in Santa Cruz County, which, as we know, is sweeping the world. So thank you for that, Jackie. But of course, Ronnie, you're right. Straws are not the only problem or even the most serious one, but they're a very visible symbol of our wasteful throwaway culture. And in fact, almost all of the laws that ban plastic straws also ban similar wasteful products, as does the law in Santa Cruz County.
That's what I was wondering if we could get into next, actually, is could you just give a little sort of overview of some of those local ordinances? I know that it to the degree that it's worth going into the details, but I know that each one's a little bit nuanced, and wondered if you could just share at least the counties and...
Sure. Well, let me start with that one. What that ordinance said is that any products used in food service in Santa Cruz County have to be either recyclable or compostable by our definition. It's not enough that some manufacturer has stamped recyclable on it. It has to be recyclable in our program. And straws, even though they're made out of a technically recyclable kind of plastic, because of their small size and lightweight, they slip through all the sorting machinery and, as a practical matter, are not recyclable. So plastic straws are out. Same thing applies to things like the little plastic stir sticks or the plastic cup toppers that some coffee chains use. At the same time, we defined compostable in very specific terms. It has to be, a product that is compostable in our systems. And so it ruled out a whole bunch of products that advertise themselves as compostable and really kind of cleaned up a lot of the mess that had been existing in that area. And that's an ordinance that was rapidly copied in many places. It's now gone statewide in California and in other places as well. And that's just one of the ordinances. After the success of the plastic bag ordinance, the county decided to tackle another big litter and waste headache, and that's disposable cups. Just in Santa Cruz County, we use hundreds of millions of them a year, if you can believe it. And most of them are thrown away after a few minutes. It's a terrible waste. So the board decided to take a similar approach and require businesses that offer those to their customers to charge an extra 25 cents for a disposable cup as a way to encourage people to bring their own cup. Well, of course, because of COVID, that's on hold, but we'll be seeing that taking effect in Santa Cruz County and many other places soon.
Right.
I could go on, but I know you have more questions.
Yeah, and we'll get into more of those details soon, too.
Okay.
One of the things that I thought was interesting is I saw in the city of Santa Cruz's ordinance, they encourage customers to bring reusable takeout containers to restaurants for their leftovers. I was just curious, how willing do you think people will be to do that, or how comfortable will staff be at accepting and handling personal dishware?
When I think of that question, I kind of take on an old-timer's reflective attitude, and I'm going to date myself here, but it reminds me of when we first introduced curbside recycling. It was a brand new idea, and a lot of people said, come on, you really think people are going to go through their trash and sort out the recyclables from the non-recyclables? And yeah, it turns out people are happy to do that. Most of us don't think twice. It's just second nature. We got the same criticism when we began asking people to bring their own bags to the store. That caught on really quickly and went very smoothly. Mm-hmm. So I think people are motivated to do the right thing if you give them the opportunity and make it easy enough. So yeah, I think this will go well overall. There are bound to be some little bumps along the way and adjustments to be made, but I think people can handle it.
People get used to it.
An important detail to be aware of, all of these laws include provisions requiring clean, appropriate containers,
right,
so that staff at businesses can turn away anything that makes them uncomfortable.
Right.
So, a little common sense goes a long way with these things.
Yeah, that was kind of one of my concerns. Was I could imagine being staff and feeling bad having to say yes to one customer and no to another, and dance that.
Yeah, we don't anticipate it's going to come up a lot, but if somebody shows up with something that's dirty or broken, or they want their drink in a bucket, or who knows what, we want to give people the option of saying, you know what, that's not really an acceptable choice. Come back with something else.
Right. Got it. Great. Well, as a reminder, you are listening to K-Squid 90.7, also ksqd.org, streaming on the internet. And we have our guest on Sustainability Now, Tim Goncharoff. And our topic is Foodware Beware. So thank you again, Tim, for joining us.
My pleasure.
We were talking about foodware and some of the practices people might get used to. One of the things that also we're hoping to talk with you about is this aspect that you brought up around compostable ware and that requirement. So what happens with compostable foodware today in this region?
Well, there are different answers in different places. In the city of Santa Cruz, for example, food waste is being turned into animal feed. Compostable utensils aren't accepted for that purpose, so they're currently being screened out and landfilled. In the county, as well as in Scotts Valley and Capitola, the material is sent to a large commercial composting operation in Monterey County that can actually compost such products. Watsonville is hoping to utilize their wastewater treatment plant. And in our neighboring counties of San Benito and Monterey, there's currently a similar mix of approaches. So it's hard to say what is going to end up being the preferred course. Lots of different answers at this point, but it's still early days.
Right, right. And my understanding is even the counties, it's in Marina where things are taken currently, right? That should be composted?
That's the main site. There's actually more than one down there.
Oh, okay. Okay. And I thought that depending on the to-go-ware, right? So with like certain utensils, if it's more plastic-like, then it becomes sort of, it doesn't end up processing and ends up in the landfill anyways. Can you speak to that at all?
Sure. And this gets a little complicated, but I'll try to simplify it. In the early days of quote-unquote compostable foodware, performance was a real issue. I saw spoons melting in my soup, for example. Some of the early iterations were pretty disappointing. And so companies did various things to make their products work better. Unfortunately, some of those changes made them less compostable. We even found that some of these companies were just putting raw plastic back into what had been a compostable product.
Oh, wow.
Turning it into something that was no longer compostable without telling anybody.
Yikes.
And it's really not practical for a little local government to go through the plethora of products and figure out, what's really acceptable and what's not. But fortunately, an organization called the Biodegradable Products Institute solved that problem for us. They're based out of Colorado, and they run big experimental compost piles, and they run food service products through their system. And if things actually completely break down in compost, then they label it compostable, and if not, they don't get certified. So our local ordinance says if you call yourself compostable, you have to have that BPI certification. So that really solved that problem for us, as well as some others. So that was very helpful.
Tim, I have a question about BPI. Do they actually do like outside compost piles, or are they processed compost? Do you know?
I know they do more than one kind of approach because, of course, there's a lot of different ways to compost. I know that at least some of them are outside, but I'm not sure if they all are. Haven't had a chance to visit their facility.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so Tim, do you think are all these ordinances and this kind of approach, is it enough to truly address the plastic waste issues facing our time?
I would say they're a good start, but they're not enough. Sure, we need more local restrictions on plastic, but if the industry just keeps producing more and more, then what have we really accomplished? Local government can only do so much. Consumers can help by making more sustainable choices. We're seeing a lot of that, so that's great. But the only real solution is to make industry responsible for their own waste products, so they have an incentive to be more efficient and less wasteful. This is an approach called Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR, and it's one of the things that I'm devoting a lot of my time to these days.
That's interesting. I wanted to ask you too, I read somewhere, and I'm sorry I don't have the citation, but I read that the plastics industry is on course to, I think, outpace coal in the greenhouse gas emissions that it's responsible for. Is that part like being addressed through policy and laws, the greenhouse gas emissions piece of it, or is plastic still kind of only seen as a waste issue?
It is being addressed, especially in California. I'm familiar with that study, by the way. It's called the new coal, plastics, and climate change. It's from an organization called Beyond Plastic, if any of your listeners want to look that up. And it's quite true, and it's getting worse. It's clear to anyone who's paying attention that the time of fossil fuels is coming to an end, but the petrochemical industry, of course, is not giving up. They've decided to address the declining use of fossil fuels by massively ramping up the production of plastics to maintain demand for their products. And remember that plastic production is one of the prime motivators for fracking, which contributes a huge amount to climate change. And yes, there are a number of laws in the pipeline to address this in California as well as elsewhere. So we're definitely going to be hearing more about this.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tim, I wanted to ask you about extended producer responsibility. You just mentioned. Where would that responsibility lie? With the foodware manufacturer, with the companies that are buying the stuff? How would that actually work? Oh.
We have some examples of EPR laws, and in fact, the local ordinance in Santa Cruz County addressing pharmaceutical waste is a good example. It defines producer in kind of a tiered system. The bottom line producer is the company that manufactures the product. But we're aware that often we're dealing with global corporations that may be hard to reach. We can pass a local ordinance in Santa Cruz or in California, but if a company is in China, they can probably just ignore us. So these laws have kind of a step-down approach. So the next defined producer is whoever imports this stuff. And then it's who distributes the stuff. And it comes down all the way to the local retail outlet that sells the stuff. So the goal is to get as close to the original manufacturer as possible, but well-written laws provide many angles to get at it, so you can provide pressure throughout the product chain. And so far it's worked pretty well. I should also mention that while EPR is fairly new in the U.S., it's not a new idea in the world. This is a very common approach to waste throughout Western Europe. They're using it extensively in Canada. It's facing a lot more resistance in the United States, but it's something we're going to see more of.
That's interesting. I feel like, I don't know if you would quite categorize this as EPR, but on a micro level, I saw that the Seaside Foodware Ordinance, they hold the business responsible for the litter generated by that business. So talking about plastic to-go-ware and things like that, now the business is at least held responsible. So I wonder if that's sort of a micro EPR.
For local government, it's a lot easier to hold local businesses responsible. Throughout my years writing legislation for Santa Cruz County, I had the opportunity many times to deal with some of those global corporations, and that was an interesting challenge, but we did have some success, so it can be done.
That's great. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We'll come back again to more on compostable ware and those ordinances, but we're also faced with a new food waste state law, 1383. I was wondering if you could speak to what that law is, and especially to where it ties to some of these local foodware ordinances as well.
Sure. This was actually something that I was very involved in helping to craft. It's one of those occasions where the state took something that was happening on a local level and decided we need to do this statewide, and in this case they took it quite a bit farther. Essentially, 1383 says that just about everybody in California, both businesses and residents, are going to have to start separating all of their organic waste. It can't just go in the trash anymore. In most cases, they'll be able to add it to their yard waste carts, but in some cases, it'll go into a separate container. That's going to vary on a local level. And then it requires local governments to provide separate collection and processing for that. In most cases, that'll mean composting, but there are some other approaches as well. And it's not just about dealing with waste at the end of the cycle, it's also about preventing waste. So, for example, there's an important component of the new law that addresses what they call food rescue. And that's ensuring that edible food never gets into the waste stream, but instead goes to help feed hungry people. So food from farms, distributors, warehouses, retail outlets, restaurants, et cetera, it makes it easier to direct that food to things like food banks and churches and other organizations that are helping to feed the hungry. So that's going to make a big difference as well. And I should mention that takes effect January 1st, although penalties for failing to fully comply don't kick in until 2024. So it effectively provides a phase-in period, which many local governments are grateful for. This is going to be a big challenge.
Of course, these laws were supposed to go in effect a couple of years ago, right? But were delayed because of COVID.
That's right.
You know, this is where's the greatest producer of organic waste? I mean, what sector? You know, what's the comparison between, for instance, agriculture and our area and household? I'm just curious about that.
Well, it's a good question, and it kind of depends on how you define producer, because food waste is sort of unique.
Yeah.
It passes through so many different hands. Mm-hmm. You could say that the farm is the ultimate producer, but the farm sells it to wholesalers who then sell it to processors, and we could say, well, it's the people who package it and put it in cans or boxes or whatever that are the producers. But then they send it on to supermarkets, and so you could say, well, you know, really it's Safeway and New Leaf Market that are the producers. But then we buy it and take it home, and ultimately we're the ones, along with places like restaurants, that decide what gets eaten and what gets thrown away. So you can hold the consumer responsible as well. But the new law kind of cuts through all that and says, hey, you're all producers, you're all responsible. Mm. But to give a clear answer to your question, Ronnie, far more comes from homes than anywhere else.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
That's why this law is targeting residential food waste generation, which is, you know, a tough nut to crack. It's really challenging, but we really can't make a big difference unless we tackle that.
All right, listeners, you are listening to K-Squid 90.7 FM and ksqd.org, streaming live on the internet. I'm Brooke Wright here in the studio with Ronnie Lipschutz, and we are the hosts of Sustainability Now. Our guest today is Tim Goncharoff. Thank you again, Tim, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And we were just talking about the state law that is leading to having organics be required for residential and commercial pickup for basically everyone. And right. I was wondering if you could also talk about, share some information about the exemptions on that. There has been in the past, a lot of self-haulers have been able to be exempt from, for instance, recycling. And then when it comes to composting, there's backyard composters.
Right.
Yeah.
There are provisions in the law for some exemptions, but it's much tighter than we usually see.
Okay.
For example, some of the rural counties asked for exemptions because they said it's not really logistically practical in counties where residents are scattered far apart. And the state said, nope, sorry, can't help you. Some of the mountainous counties said, well, you know, we have roads that are under snow 6 months out of the year, and it's, you know, we're just not able to do pickup. California said, figure it out. So they ended up allowing rare exemptions in rural areas with significant bear problems that thankfully doesn't affect too many people. But they are allowing self-hauling as long as it's carefully regulated. Now, this is another area where Santa Cruz County got out in front of the state, and they've been regulating self-haulers for some time, requiring most people to have curbside service. But now the state is saying, no, we want everybody to have curbside service, and you can apply to be a self-hauler if you've got some kind of disability or some kind of, overwhelming geographical obstacle, but far fewer people are going to qualify to be self-haulers under the new rules than people are used to. So currently, as many as a third of California residents do not participate in any kind of organized waste collection, and the state is hoping to trim those numbers dramatically. So for folks who've been used to doing that, this is going to be a significant change.
So is that on the county to provide that curbside, through the local hauler like green waste or whatnot, or is that on the individual? Where does that fall on?
It falls mostly to local government, whether city or county. Okay. And of course, local governments have been hollering that that's an awful lot to expect. Not only do they risk antagonizing some of their residents, but it's going to be quite expensive. We need hundreds of new compost facilities across California, and they take a lot of time and money to build. We're going to need to substantially increase our collection fleets. We're going to need a lot more staff, both among the haulers and among local government, to handle the administration of this. So it's adding a lot of cost at a time when many local governments are struggling because of COVID and other things. Okay. So it's one of the reasons the state has kind of slow walked the implementation deadlines, but they have said, this is the future. You're going to have to come to grips with it. And it's often being compared to the beginning of curbside recycling, which kind of started in the 70s in California, but became mandatory in the 90s. And it's really that scale of a change. This is going to be a whole new ballgame, and it's going to be a challenge to get used to it.
And what about for backyard composters and such? Are people going to be exempt from paying for an organics pickup if they say, oh, I already, have my chickens?
That's still somewhat of an open question. In Santa Cruz County, that is allowed. There is some hesitation at the state level because of the limitations of backyard composting. For example, typically people who are doing backyard composting don't put things like meat or bones in their compost. And, there are other kinds of products we've talked about, like compostable food serviceware, that you're probably not going to want to handle at that level. Some kinds of products just really require a large-scale commercial compost operation to generate enough heat to break things down. So the state's concerned that if we have too much backyard composting, it just means a lot of waste is still going to go in the landfill. So that piece of it still remains to be sorted out.
Okay, I see. I want to actually come back to Foodware again. There's one thing we didn't get to, which was you mentioned BPI certification, and that is a requirement in the county's ordinance for Foodware. To make sure that it would break down in the commercial industrial facilities you're talking about. There's also an issue of PFAS, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that and if BPI certification takes care of that.
It does.
Okay.
And for your curious listeners, there's a little bit more chemistry. PFAS is per and polyfluorinated alkyl substances, which really just means a class of chemicals that are used to make products work better. And they really are, in some ways, miraculous. They make plastic more flexible. They provide coatings on paper products that make them more water resistant and more durable. They really enhance products in a number of ways. The problem is that when they break down, they emit toxic chemicals that never go away. PFAS is a forever pollutant. And this brings up an issue that often surprises people who are not deeply involved in these issues. There's a widespread assumption that if you're going to start using chemicals in products widely used by consumers, that you're going to go through a rigorous testing process and make sure they're safe. Well, in most cases, that's not true.
Right.
Companies can use anything they want, and it's only after it's out there in the marketplace that people can say, well, hold on a minute, there's a problem here. And then it can take years and millions of dollars and lawsuits, et cetera, to finally get those products out of the marketplace.
Right.
And that's the process we found with PFAS. But to get back to your question, this was a fringe benefit of requiring BPI certification. The county had actually implemented that requirement, and then BPI announced that because PFAS was being used in so many food service products and it was such a problem, they were no longer going to certify anything that contained PFAS. So by requiring that certification, we had solved that problem too.
Okay.
So that was kind of an unanticipated benefit that we were very grateful for.
So in practice, does that mean, because what I've seen is that, so it seems like PFAS are there to provide, you just described some flexibility and also water resistance, right? So in practice, does that mean that any to-go-ware that has that sort of plasticky or water-resistant capacity is dangerous and likely has PFAS? Or have you seen some other, solutions to still provide that water resistance?
Solutions.
Okay.
And you ask a question that many consumers have asked themselves. And, I'm more informed than most. This is what I do.
Right.
But people will bring me products and I'll look at it and take it apart. And most of the time, I cannot tell what it's made of, what went into it, what it's coated with. You really need some pretty heavy-duty science to figure that out. You can't tell by looking at it. You can't tell by the label. So that's why we need third-party verification systems like BPI. The good news is if you go to their website, and if anybody wants to check it out, that's bpiworld.org. There are thousands of certified products listed there. Any kind of food service product you need, they've got probably many examples of it on their website. So if you're looking for something for your business or for your home that you can feel confident is safe, that's a good place to look. And,
Right.
I should mention another step that we often took in the county because we were so often writing ordinances that nobody had ever done before. These were the first time they were implementing big changes. And the last thing we want to do is present local businesses with rules that are impossible to follow. So when we implemented this requirement for compostable food service products, first thing we did was go to the distributors, the restaurant suppliers, and tell them, this is the direction we're thinking of going. Are you going to be able to meet these rules and still serve the needs of your customers? And they all said, oh yeah, no problem. We got lots and lots of suitable products. Mm-hmm. So, a little bit of homework like that can make the whole process go smoother. And we did that many times on different kinds of legislation.
Tim, I'm a backyard composter, and I know that a lot of the plastics that pass through our lives require high temperature composting.
Right,
So
sure.
so there are substances such as PHAs that will supposedly break down under sort of normal backyard conditions. And can you say something about that and their advantages or disadvantages, and whether you think they're going to be able to penetrate the U.S. market?
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Ronnie. PHAs are fascinating. And for anybody who wants to look them up and get more information, PHA stands for polyhydroxyalkanoates. And what's different about PHAs is that these are natural chemicals. These are chemicals that have been produced by living organisms since essentially the beginning of life on this planet. And we know of hundreds of examples so far, and we'll certainly discover many more. And they show tremendous promise for providing the kind of durable, compostable, non-toxic products that we need. The development of PHAs is still in an early phase, but I think we will soon start to see many products employing them in the place of PFAS and other toxic solutions. And I think there's a really important lesson here beyond the immediate problem of appropriate foodware products, and that's how our usual approach of trying to strong-arm nature often leads to new problems like toxic byproducts. But nature has been solving problems for far longer than we have, and if we pay more attention to answers that have already evolved in nature, we'll be much more likely to end up with sustainable solutions.
Yeah, I guess using banana leaves instead of plastic plates, right? That would be the way to go.
This is Sustainability Now. I'm Brooke Wright here with Ronnie Lipschutz in the studio, and our guest today is Tim Goncharoff. And Tim, we are very close to the end of our show, and I really wanted to ask you kind of a fun question. So You've described some of the, well, fun for us, I assume, maybe not everybody, but you describe a lot of history you have with developing laws and ordinances. And I just wondered if you could walk us through one of your favorite local laws that you were part of and how it came to fruition.
There's so many examples, but I'll share one that was kind of fun for me. I think most people know that it's now illegal in Santa Cruz County for hotels and motels to provide those tiny bottles of personal care products that we all used to be so used to. And, most of those went straight in the trash unused, so it was terribly wasteful. We were happy to see them go. That idea initially came from the local environmental community, along with a number of other ideas for reducing plastic waste, and we ran them by the county supervisors, and this was an idea that they liked. So next we reached out to the local hotel and motel industry, as well as the local organizations that promote tourism, and they grumbled a little bit, but they didn't have any strong objections. Mostly they just wanted a little more time than we had in mind. And it helped a lot when we pointed out that switching to refillable dispensers would save them money. And as always, the local independent operators were very supportive. They're as green as anyone else in Santa Cruz. But the big chains just shrugged and said, hey, you'll have to talk to the corporate office. We're used to that. We've done a lot of that. So a lot of calls and emails, and that mostly went okay. These big companies are used to crazy Santa Cruz and our wild new laws. Then we reached out to the local hotel supply companies, like I mentioned earlier with food serviceware, to let them know this is coming so they could be ready, make sure they have the products they need to serve their customers. And finally, we began educating the public. And then the interesting part happened. Some other cities and counties did the same. The state of California said, well, sure, that makes sense. And it became a state law. New York State recently did the same. Hawaii is on the way. Many more will follow. But meanwhile, the hotel chains themselves began looking at this and realized it made a lot of sense. Some of the giant chains like Hilton and Hyatt and Marriott, the world's largest, all announced that they were rolling this out at their hotels all around the world. Before our local ordinance even took effect, more than 10,000 hotels with more than 1 million hotel rooms had switched to refillable dispensers.
Wow.
That's the power of a good example. That was a fun one.
That's great. And when was that?
That just took effect this year, in fact.
Oh, great.
It was passed 3 years ago, but we allowed long lead time.
Nice.
And the world took it and ran with it, and God bless them.
So you went out with a bang from the county, it sounds like.
Well, I'm not done yet, but yeah, that was a nice one to finish my time at the county with.
Right. Well, on that now, where to next, Tim? So you left the county staff. What are you headed into now?
Well, I'm still involved with issues on statewide, national, to some extent, international level. You mentioned my work with the National Stewardship Action Council. I'm very involved with that group. So we push extended producer responsibility solutions across the globe. I'm spending a lot of time on that. I get a lot of inquiries asking for help with legislation in other states, other parts of California, and sometimes internationally, doing a lot of writing and speaking. Plenty of problems still to solve, and I'm going to keep working on it as long as I can.
And is that thanks to your TED Talk that they know about you?
That helped. In fact, I'm speaking on an international seminar later this week, online, of course, that was inspired because somebody I don't know saw my TED Talk in Washington, D.C. and thought that I'd make an interesting speaker. So you never know where things will lead.
Right. Nice. Let's see. Ronnie, did you have a question? It looked like as we wrap up here.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, you had experience in cap and trade program development, which of course is somewhat orthogonal to plastics and composting.
Indeed.
But maybe you can tell us a little bit about, that, how you got involved, and, your prognostication for cap and trade in California.
Sure. And, I have to acknowledge my supervisors at the county and the Board of Supervisors for their generosity in letting me work on many issues that were, in some cases, a little tangential to my job description. They were very kind that way. But this was one that actually had impacts on local government, so there was a case to be made. And you probably know California's cap and trade program was one of the first of its kind. It's still one of the largest. And there was a lot of debate about how it should work, how different organizations will participate, if at all. And I got involved on behalf of the county and by extension local governments across California because we were making an argument that local governments do a tremendous amount to battle climate change, from things like maintaining parks, forests, and open space, providing mass transit, making compost, reducing waste, providing electric vehicle fleets, on and on and on. And we argued that we should receive some of the benefits of the program to help fund these efforts. And in the end, we lost that argument. That the state fought back saying, well, this is all great and we appreciate it, but the goal is to inspire new efforts, not to reward you for things that you would do anyway. So, they had a point. But the program is still evolving. Every year, the legislature debates as part of the budgeting process where cap and trade funding should go. It's a tremendous amount of money, at least $1 billion every year. And I continue to participate in those discussions, and that will continue.
Great. Well, we're coming to the end of our time, Tim. Is there any legislation you are especially eager to work on?
I am. More and more, I'm taking the broad approach. How can we really have a deep impact on some of these big environmental issues? I've talked about the extended producer responsibility approach, and we have had legislation introduced in California as well as in the U.S. Congress that would have implemented this approach for plastic waste as well as a wide range of other problematic waste products. That has not yet succeeded. The legislative process is challenging, and there's a lot of power and money pushing from the other direction.
But there's support?
There is absolutely support. Many people realize the problem. They realize that unless we get the manufacturers on board, there's no way we're ever going to make significant headway. So that's something that I'm going to focus a lot of attention on in the coming years, and I think eventually we'll get it across the goal line.
It sounds like your strategy is often to get buy-in from the manufacturers themselves. So is that something that you're also doing as part of that?
Oh, absolutely. You know, some people treat the corporate world as the enemy, and I understand where that comes from. But in my experience, they're just like everybody else. They're people who care more or less about the same things we do. And if you can talk to them on an individual level, you can often find common ground. And in Santa Cruz County, we had lots of success with giant global corporations that people thought we'd never get anywhere with. And they cooperated more than you would expect. And I'll give you a quick example,
Yes,
because I
please
know
do.
we're running out of time. When we implemented the local ordinance we talked about before, requiring recyclable and compostable food serviceware, and I started calling up all the chains, one that I knew was going to be a challenge was Starbucks. And so they have a vice president for sustainability. I got her on the phone. I explained what we were up to. And I said, I know this is something you're trying to do. That's why you have your position. So why don't we think of this as an experiment? You've got 4 stores in our county. It's not going to be a big deal. Let's try it out, see how it goes. If it goes well, maybe you'll want to implement it somewhere else. And she saw the wisdom of that. And so we rolled it out in those 4 stores, and it went really well. But what happened next shocked the heck out of me. A few months later, Starbucks sent out a press release announcing that on the basis of a successful experiment in Santa Cruz County, they were rolling out more sustainable products to more than 28,000 stores around the world. That was a great day.
That's great. And that is one of the stories that you share in your TED Talk, I believe.
It is.
Right.
It is. It's too good a story to keep to myself.
Great.
Okay, Tim. Well, thank you so much for being our guest on Sustainability Now.
Well, thank you both. It's been a pleasure.
We look forward to hearing from you again in the future.
Anytime.
This has been Sustainability Now. Thanks for listening, and thanks to all the staff and volunteers who make KSQD your community radio station, and especially to Emily Dunham, who works tirelessly to make sure that we can make our connections. And so, until every other Sunday, Sustainability Now.
Mr. Thompson calls the waiter, orders steak and baked potato. He leaves the bone and gristle and he never eats the skin. The busboy comes and takes it, with a cough contaminates it. He puts it in a can with coffee grounds and sardine tins. And the truck comes by on Friday, carts it all away. 1,000 trucks just like it are converging on the bay. Oh, garbage, 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 garbage. We're filling up the seas with garbage, 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 garbage. What will we do when there's no place left to put all the garbage? Garbage, 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 garbage. Mr. Thompson starts his Cadillac and winds it down the freeway track, leaving friends and neighbors in a hydrocarbon haze. He's joined by lots of smaller cars, all sending gases to the stars, there to form a seething cloud that hangs for 30 days. And the sun licks down into it with an ultraviolet tongue, turns it into smog, and then it settles in our lungs. Oh, garbage, 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 garbage. We're filling up the skies with garbage, 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 garbage. What will we do when there's nothing left to breathe but garbage, 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 garbage. Getting home and taking off his shoes, he settles with the evening news, while the kids do homework with the TV in one ear. While Superman for the 1000th time sells talking dolls and conquers crime, dutifully they learn the date of birth of Paul Revere. In the papers there's a piece about the mayor's middle name. He gets it read in time to watch the All-Star Bingo game. Oh, garbage, 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 garbage. We're filling up our minds with garbage, 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 garbage. What will we do when there's nothing left to read, and nothing left to need, and nothing left to watch, nothing left to touch, nothing left to walk upon, and nothing left to talk upon, nothing left to see, and nothing left to be but garbage, 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 garbage.